So I've been playing Parasite Eve. You know, back when the first Resident Evil came out, a lot of other companies wanted a piece of that sweet survival horror pie. Konami had Silent Hill, Crave had Galarians, and Squaresoft had Parasite Eve. Of course, Square wouldn't be Square if the game wasn't an RPG hybrid somehow. So they just kinda lifted the battle system from Vagrant Story and took the spooky bits and puzzling from Resident Evil to make what was to be Square's very first mature rated game. So strap on your adulthood, cause everybody under the age of 18 watching this will spontaneously combust at the sight of Aya's running speed. Anyway, our story takes place in the mystical land of New York City and follows the tale of Aya Brea. When the game starts, Aya is on a date with this guy, and they're going to see an opera at the Carnegie Hall. However, just like everyone under the age of 18 watching this, the people in the crowd spontaneously burst into flames. And apparently that's all this lady's doing. Her name is Eve, and she uses mitochondria to set people ablaze. Of course, Aya won't stand for this, you know, being that she's a police officer and all. And thus, Aya and the rest of the NYPD have to solve this mitochondrial mystery. Now, the story, albeit a bit simple compared to your Final Fantasies, is actually kinda cool. It's very direct and clear about its characters, and it doesn't bumblefuck around too much. Things like the way Aya shoves aside her date when duty calls, or how her partner in Justice Daniel punches an annoying journalist. Right off the bat, they show you that these people mean business. The story may be a bit hokey at times, but overall it's actually pretty okay writing-wise despite a few awkwardly formulated sentences here and there. Also, compared to other survival horror games at the time, it forgoes voice acting in favor of text, which is good considering the quality of said voice acting.
Leon! Hey! Hey, Leon!
And despite the text, the game still feels surprisingly cinematic. And I don't mean like over 1 billion hours of FMV, bullet points on the back of the box cinematic, but more actually kinda cute like cinematic. The game does a lot of cool things with camera angles, and it made it feel very reminiscent of action movies that came out around the same time. Something else that also contributes to this is the animation. If you look at Square's other stuff like Final Fantasy, you'll start to see that each character has its own set of animations. So because of that, long conversations can start to feel a bit static at times. Now, for as far as I could tell, this game doesn't really have any of that. And if it does, then at least it does a much better job of hiding it than the Final Fantasy games did. Either way, the less robotic animation and the varied camera angles made the dialogue feel a lot more vibrant than it would have otherwise. Also, I really like the realistic vibe the game has. Something about the way the pre-rendered backgrounds look works really well for an urban setting in my opinion. I mean, if you look at Midgar or Raccoon City, the backgrounds just have a certain level of griminess that only recently has been recreated in fully 3D rendered worlds. Like, the police station actually looks and feels like a police station, with the messy desks and the wooden floorboards and shit. And especially the Chinatown segment looks really good because of the pre-rendered backgrounds in my opinion. The game's music also helps to make everything feel more down-to-earth and realistic. It forgoes the usual horror and fantasy music and uses a more jazzy, laid-back sound. So there's lots of pads, breakbeats, and all the other standard shit you used to get from Roland synthesizers. I don't know, it feels very big city office building-y to me, and it fits the game perfectly. That said, the game isn't scary at all, though I'm not even sure if it really tries to be. I mean, it doesn't really do horror in the same way Silent Hill or Resident Evil did, and to me it seems more like kind of a modern-day cop drama than anything. It does have some surprisingly graphic gore though, but it's mostly just a game with some mild adult themes and a serious vibe, instead of some true butt-curdling horror. Anyway, Gameplay-wise, it's pretty much like what I already said. They took the battle system from Vagrant Story and placed it in a survival horror game. So there's turn-based combat, random encounters, and puzzles with awkward controls. And while this combination could have been a total train wreck, it strangely isn't. Thing is, the combination of puzzling and random encounters usually makes for some very frustrating gameplay. Nothing quite like doing a block puzzle only to get interrupted every few fucking seconds. But in Parasite Eve, the battles only happen at certain hotspots. And after you fought there once, the chance of it happening again in that location decreases. So it never really reaches that point where the battles start feeling like interruptions cause they don't really interrupt when puzzling. Which is especially great considering how slow the battles usually are. Thing is, it uses an ATB system similar to the Final Fantasy games, so you need to wait for a bar to fill up before you're able to attack. Now, a lot of people won't like this, and I will admit that it certainly pushes my patience at times. Apart from that though, the combat is actually quite different from your typical JRPG fare. If you played the before mentioned Vagrant Story or Final Fantasy XII, then some of this should seem familiar to you already. Thing is, the game has a possible real-time combat system. What that means is that you're still able to walk around while waiting for the ATB to charge so you can dodge enemy attacks. When the ATB fills up, you get all the usual stuff like attack, magic, items, and the option to change your equipment. The only big difference here is that you're only able to attack enemies within a certain range. So some fast-moving enemies will be easier to hit with a weapon that has a bigger range, which is why you have the option to change your equipment mid-battle. Also, the amount of damage you do depends on how close or far away you are from your target as well. So it adds an element of strategy you don't have in most other JRPGs, which is good considering you'll only be controlling one character for the entire game. And I mean, having Aya just stand there doing nothing while the ATB fills up would have been pretty fucking boring. Still, the battles aren't exactly fast or action-packed at all. And especially near the end, it did get a little bit tedious for me to have to deal with large amounts of enemies at the same time. Thing is, when it's very crowded on screen, dodging becomes near impossible. So by the time that happens, you'll be taking a lot of damage even though it isn't really your fault. But besides that, the combat is fine. And the game actually has some pretty satisfying mechanics as well. Like I said, the game isn't really grind heavy at all, but leveling up and shooting stuff does feel pretty good because of the sound effects and how you see the bars fill up after every battle. Like, I could easily see the battle system be strong enough to carry a more battle heavy game, even though I'm still glad that it isn't. Anyway, apart from the battles, you get all the usual RPG stuff like EXP and leveling up. The only thing that really stood out to me here was the ability to modify your weapons. Modding weapons is basically just adding additional effects like attack or defense +1 to your current equipment. And while there's a limited amount of effect slots on each gun, you're still able to add more slots at the police department. Still, I only got about 2 or 3 chances to actually add slots to my gun, since the game is pretty short and you don't really go back to the police department a whole lot. However, you do get tools that you can use to pry gun mods off of an older gun to add them to a newer one. The only issue I had with this was that I spent most of my upgrades on the M16, so every gun I got afterwards kinda sucked in comparison. And even if they had some kind of effect that I wanted, I could have just used the modding tool to add those to my M16 as well. And I know that this isn't really the way that you're meant to play the game, but they never really punished me for doing it either. So I was never incentivized to use different weapons at all, despite what kind of perk they may have had. Apart from that, the only real issue I had was the incredibly small inventory. I mean, despite the fact that it's upgradable, I never felt like I had enough space to carry the things I needed. Weapons, armor, health potions, ammo, and key items are all stored in the same little inventory. And key items can't be discarded even after they've already served their purpose, which kinda sucks. Anyway, overall it's actually a pretty good game, that despite its bandwagony reasons of existing, plays nothing like Resident Evil. And it doesn't really play like a standard JRPG either. Also, David Bowie apparently liked this game, which led to him doing voice work for its sequel. which may or may not be the game I'll be reviewing next week. So join me next time as we continue this mitochondrial adventure with Parasite Eve 2. You know, if you want to, I guess. You don't have to, but I'd like it if you did. I'd really like it if you watch my video.
Leon! Hey! Hey, Leon!
What's up, bitch? What's up? So, how's it been? I really like, I've been up to stuff.
Stop looking at my boobs.
I was not looking at the books. Books. Here you have a book.
But I can't read, Leon. You know that.
Well, you better start learning to read, because it's fucking Twilight. I don't fucking think you like Twilight. Well, you do.
But I really don't like Twilight. It really sucks. I'm some kind of bitch at Kunat.
Oh, the character is beautiful. Fucking vampires and werewolves and shit is fucking awesome.